Okay. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Omarav, Kulon, Poislin Bekahun. All of these four Gittin mentioned in the Mishnah that were lacking in the Shema, they're not matter, they're not good Gittin. They will not be matter her to marry. Nevertheless, if they were married to Kaihanim, they l'chumra, they have the status of a gerusha, and because of that, they cannot be with their husbands anymore. Where does this come from? So Rashi teaches us a new concept called Reach Haget. Let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says, Poistlin hein oiso min kahuna. They possible from kahuna in by the kohen if they're married to kohanim nivsla alav mishum gerusha. They will no longer be able to live with their husbands, even though the get's not a good get. Chutz min harishon. That's a little weiter, because the first shita said Amarav kulam poistlin b'chuna no chutz min harishon, except for the first case. The first case was so not lishma, it wasn't even written to be a get. It was just written for practice for the cipher. That wouldn't possibly from Kahuna. Why is that? So let's see Rashi. The first case in the Mishnah was a star that wasn't even written as a get. It was just a practice for the cipher. But the three last cases that were Gittin, they just had problems with the Shema. Possibly they would passel a woman from Kahuna. Why? The Reach Haget Poisel B'Kahuna. Rashi introduces us to a new concept called Reach Haget. You don't need to be Mugureshes to be possible to a kohen. Even if she has something that's called a Reach Haget, something that smells like it. It's not even kosher. We know for sure it's not kosher. But the fact that it smells like a get, it has shaykhs to a get, that's enough to aser a woman to kahuna. Where do you find this concept of Reach Haget? The Tanya Beperek Basra, someone takes a get and gives it to his wife, and he says the following: Harayat Migureshes Mimeni, you're divorced from me, but the Iat Muteres L'Chaladim, but you're not mutter to anybody else. A weird type of arrangement to make a get. The halach is, even though she's usher to everybody else, because her get is not matter her to everybody else, nevertheless, Paslam and Nakuna, Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, V'isha gerusha meisha lo yikachu. Afilu lo yisgarsha ela meisha, even though this woman is only divorced from her husband, but lagabe everybody else, she's not divorced. Ulachayim lehudra, still tzulakuna. So from here we learn that even though it's not really a get, it smells like a get. That's enough to answer her to kahuna. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Af harishay nami posh. Shmuel's, even the first case where it wasn't even written l'shem get, that's also considered reach get, and it will also pass her to her husband if her husband is a kohen.
Don't we have a rule set down how to give a get? The husband cannot say harayat migureshes. He has to give it to Adim, and Adim have to be Masira, and they have to say, if not before the Nachrim, if it didn't come from Medina Sayyam, the Adim have to give it the get. Or can he give her the get directly?
He can give her the get directly. It actually, if you look at the words of the pasuk describe a transaction where he gives it to her. Look at the pasuk, it says v'chasav law sefer krisus v'nosan biyada. He actually hands it to her in her hand. The Edom witnessed that, but the base case of get, the textbook case of get, is when the husband hands it directly to the wife. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. Shmuel Amar, Af Rishon Nami Poisel. The other Shmuel Atemei. Shmuel is going according to his shita. The Amar Shmuel said, Kol Mokaim Shashanu Chachamim get posel. Whenever the word posel is used, if it says get bottle or eino get, that means that it's nothing at all. But if it's get posel, it means it's a get, but it's a posel again. So in all those cases, posel, the get is posel, meaning the woman is usher to marry. Baru Poisel, it will still passel this woman because of Reach Haget, and she will no longer be allowed to live with her husband. And Chalitza Psula, whenever the Mishnah discusses a Chalitza that's Psula, again, Psula, it's a passel of Chalitza, which means she cannot go and marry anybody, but it does ruin the Zika to the point that none of the brothers can do Yibam on her. So now she only has one option available to her, and that's a proper chalitza. In Marava Amri Mishmeder Rabbalozar, in Marava they said in the name of Rabbalozar, discussing what's a pasula chalitza, smoil. If the chalitza was done on his left foot or with her left hand, that's not a kosher chalitza. The lila, or if it's done at night, those are psulois. They're not good chalitza, meaning she's not allowed to marry anybody she wants. But upoislois, but she's no longer allowed to marry one of her husband's brothers. However, there's cases where the chalitza is so puzzle that it won't even cause that problem. And that, turning over onto Chav Hey, Amar Aleph is katan. If the person who did chalitza was a katan, that's no shaykhs to chalitza. Or van pilya, they didn't use the proper chalitza shoe, they used a soft sock. Those are psulos, those are not valid chalitzas, but the ain poislos. They will not passel her. In other words, she could still do evil. Ziri Amar, Ziri took the exact opposite position, and he says, Kulam ain poislin chutz min ha'achrin. None of these gittin are considered rech haget. The only one that's rech haget, no one. None of them are rech haget, and there's no concern here. The last one, the reason why it passes her is because, remember we said the reason why he can't say, I will decide later on which one of my wives this get was for. That doesn't work because it's a suffix of Breira works or not. And this relies on Breira. So Zeiri says, since we have a suffix, do you say Breira or not? It's possible that this is a get, a perfectly good get, and it's possible that it's a possible get. So therefore we have to be machmer as if she is Mugureshes. And then she's not allowed to live with her husband. But we also have to be machmer and decide that she's not Mugureshes, and therefore she's not allowed to get married. V'chein Amar Rabasi, Rabasi agreed with Zeiri. V'chein Amar Rabasi, Kulan ein poislin chutz min ha'achrin. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan was the most mekel, and he said, Af achrei nami ein poislin. Even the case of Breira doesn't pass, which must mean that he's not masupik. If you say yesh Breira, ein Breira, he must be 100% sure that you say ein Breira. Where do you say in Breira? There's two brothers who yarshened an estate from their father, and now they're dividing it amongst themselves. So do you say Breira, meaning whatever Reuven took was always destined to be his from when Yeshua split up the land, and whatever Shimon took was always destined to be his from when Yeshua split up the land? Do you say that, or do you say, no, we have no idea whose property really belongs to? How can we know? But it's in Breira. We don't know that just because he decided to take this, that was always destined to be his. So we have to assume that there was a barter, which means whatever Reuven took might have been Shimon's, but he traded it for what Shimon took. And therefore, Lukuch is saying, the properties that go to Reuven and go to Shimon, they only have a status as Lukuach. We know when you buy a property, it's really a long-term lease. You only own it until Yovel. And in fact, these two brothers that split up, every Yovel, they have to re-divvy the properties. Therefore, Machzirin Zeh Lo Zeh B'Yovel. Every Yovel year, they start over again because it's just as if they purchased those properties from each other. As Rashi says, L'kuch is saying, they ain't Breira. We don't say Breira, so we don't know that each property that each of these two brothers got was always really destined for them. The Ikal Mechish, Chelik Shenot Al Zeh, Hoyuroi Lachim. It's possible that the Chelik that Reuven took really was destined to go to Shimon. Vechlifu, and now they just swapped. In order to split it up properly, they can't know whose property is destined for who. So they say, listen, if I have your property, we'll swap. Behind the Lakucha, so that really behind the Lakicha, that has the status of a sale. And like every other sale, It goes back to scratch on Yovel. Because there's a mitzvah by Yovel to put everything back the way it was. And then they can go re-split it up again.
So
that's
three generations down.
It's going to get very, very messy because you're talking about multiple generations, and there's might be two brothers, but they can be 20 Einiglach and they can be 70 Ud Einiglach, and you're going to be busy scrambling every Yovel. Yeah, it'll get quite messy.
Is that how it actually happened?
I'm sorry?
Is that how it actually happened?
According to Rabbi Yochanan, I don't know if we park like Rabbi Yochanan. So Zok the Gemara.
It would be interesting to know.
There would be a big family reunion every Yovel, and I'm not sure if it would be a family reunion or a family feud. But it would get complicated.
No, but it would be, you say, like, if Mashiach comes tomorrow, and we go back to Eretz Yisrael and everybody gets back to,
it's going to be a big balagan.
It's going to be impossible.
Yeah. I guess Tishbi Yataz Kushbi boys, he'll have to figure that out as well. Okay. So let's see the Gemara. So what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Do you see he holds Ein Breira? And therefore, the logic would be that by a case of get, since he holds Ein Breira, it's surely not a good get, and therefore the Isha doesn't need to become possible. Utricha. Why did Rabbi Yochanan need to share with us the halacha of Ein Breira by get, as well as the halacha of Ein Breira by Achin Shechoku? Once we know in one of these places that he holds Ein Breira, we'll be able to apply his rule on our own to all the different places in Shas where the halacha might be relevant. In each of these cases, Rabbi Yochanan needed to tell us his halacha, because otherwise you wouldn't have known the other place necessarily. The Itmar Baha, if Rabbi Yochanan only told us by Gittin that it's surely Ein Breira and it's not a get of Adoyis, I would have said, Baha Ka'amar Rabbi Yochanan Ein Breira. Only in this case did Rabbi Yochanan say Ein Breira. You know why? Mishum deba'inon la lishma. Forget Breira. Even if you hold Yesh Breira, it's still not enough, because by Gittin you need not that you should find out later what the lishma was for back when the get was written. At the actual time of the ksiva, at the actual time of the ksiva, the get had to be clear, it had to be known who it was written for. So therefore, if he only told us the halacha by Gittin, it wouldn't tell us anything about Breira, because Gittin would be possible even if he held Yesh Breira. Aval hasa mecharu, but maybe by the Yerusha mecharu, the Omer Rachmana lehada b'yovel, and since it's a mecher, it would go back b'yovel. Aval Yerusha umatana loy, but Yerusha and matana maybe not. So maybe a mecher would go back b'yovel, but maybe Yerusha and matana would not go back b'yovel. So you wouldn't know that he held that he would go back b'yovel. But Yashmin Sada, and if he only told us by the case of Yerusha that it goes back by Yovel, I don't know that he holds for sure Ein Breira. He might only be Mesupik if it's Yesh Breira or Ein Breira, and he might just be Machmer to the Chumrah. To be Machmer on a Suffolk, he's making it go back by Yovel, because there's a Suffolk if you're Mechuyev to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Yovel. Inami Ketchila. Or since originally there was not a proper chalukah, now as well. As Rashi says, Kishem shemetchila, hoisa b'loy chalukah l'shechad, kach yachshem yovel l'shechad. It has to go back to, even if you hold Yesh Breira, it's got to go back to its original state by Yovel, which is not split up, which it's all one estate. So at the end of the day, you don't see anywhere that Rabbi Yochanan holds bevadois Ein Breira. From Gittin, it's not connected to the halacha of Breira at all. And from the case of the Yerusha, you only see that he's misupik if Yesh Breira or Ein Breira. Therefore, we no longer know that Rabbi Yochanan holds Vada Ein Breira. Boy minei Rabbi Hoshia me Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Hoshi had a very interesting shaila that he asked of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar lelavler, someone told a soifer, Ksoiv, write a get for one of my two wives. Which one will be the wife? Le'eze sheteitze b'pesach chila. The wife of mine that comes out of the door first. Obviously, he knows that his wives like to go shopping and they each have their own credit card that they spend a fortune on. So he says the first woman to leave the house in the morning to go spend my money, she's the one that I want to divorce. The first woman who leaves the door, of course, she's on her way to go shopping, she should be divorced. Now, so this is a similar case to the case of our Mishnah. In the case of our Mishnah, he was going to decide later which wife he wants to divorce.
You had a case like that in Tanakh.
That's right. That's right. He said, whoever comes out of my door first will be set aside as a carbon. That ended up being his daughter. That was Yiftach Hagalodi. So Zok Gemara. Here, the shaila that Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Hoshi asked from Rabbi Yehuda, was where it was out of his control, the selection of who is the woman's that's going to be getting the get. In our Mishnah, we had a similar case, but in our Mishnah, he was going to decide later. Can you compare the two? Zok Gemara Amar Lei, Rabbi Yehuda did compare the two. And he said, Tinitua, your shaila is similar to the case of our Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah, in the last case, yes, mikan Amar, yes, mikan Amar the lavler ksayv leiz sheretza egaresh pasal egaresh boy. Why? Alma ein brera. So the same way we say ein brera when he was going to decide which woman he wants this get to be lishma for, so too you will say ein brera when he's leaving it up to them, whoever's going to come out of the doorway first. Correct Gemara, who said that you can compare the two? Esvei, ha'omer levanov, if someone says, so basically the conclusion of Rabbi Yehuda was that ein brera. I'm going to prove to you that we hold yesh brera. Why? Because of an interesting case. There was a man who had 5 children, and he lived in Israel. They were all married to their own families, and he was going to Yerushalayim for Pesach to be Oil Regel. And he got there early, and his children were dragging their feet. They weren't coming, and he wanted to get them fast to come to Yerushalayim. So he said that I am shechting my Korban Pesach, and in order for you to be included in my Korban Pesach, you need mina, right? We know there's a halacha is you have to register to be part of a Korban Pesach. So we said, the first one of you that makes it to Yerushalayim, he's the one who I'm going to allow to be registered on my Korban Pesach. So I'm a levanov hareini sheichet is a Pesach al mi shial became rishon Yerushalayim. When I shech the Korban Pesach, it's already in the afternoon and you haven't arrived yet. I'm going to say that I'm shechting it and I'm including in it the child that's going to make it to Yerushalayim first. That's mamash a case of brera, because at the time of the shechita, he doesn't know who's coming first. When the first child gets into Yerushalayim, not only does he get his own chelik, but he also drags his siblings along. So Rabbi Hoshi is asking Rabbi Yehuda, I have here a raya that you say ein brera. I'm sorry, I have a raya here that you say yesh brera. So how could you, Rabbi Yehuda, tell me ein brera? You see over here a case of yesh brera. Amalei, Rabbi Yehuda told him, Hoshia bari, my dear son Hoshia, I think you're making a big mistake. Ma inyan psachim etzel Gittin. How could you bring me a raya from the case of psachim to our shaila? That shaila by psachim has nothing to do with brera. Because ha'itmar Allah Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan told us what this was all about. It was kedei lezarzim b'mitzvahs. He was just trying to encourage them to come up to Yerushalayim. But of course, he always had in mind to include everybody, all of his children in this Korban Pesach. He just said that as a challenge to encourage his children to come quickly. Dekanami, I can prove it to you that that's what the brisa means. The katani, kivan shenichnas risha in roisha v'rubai, zacha bechelkoi, umezaka zacha v'imai. When the first guy gets in, he's now bringing his brothers with him. How is that possible? Yomit bishlama dam ninu meikara. If you're going to tell me that when the father shechted the carbon, he always had it in mind the whole family shopper, then it makes sense. And then really he was just trying to encourage them to come, because regardless, he was including them in the carbon Pesach. If you say that he didn't include them, how could they be included after the shechita into the carbon Pesach? We know that the cutoff to register on the carbon Pesach is by the shechita, as it says in the Mishnah. We also learned that it was just zrizus, because as an epilogue to this brisa, the brisa says, the daughters came up earlier than the sons. They figured they're not going to do their makeup in Chotlar, in other cities, they'll do their makeup when they arrive. So that because of that, they came early. And the boys, they figured, I don't want to go to the mikveh in Yerushalayim. It's probably dirty. There's so many people there. I'm going to go to mikveh back home. So the sons came late, and the girls came early. The daughters were Zerizim, they moved fast, and the sons, they were lower. So it's interesting, because this whole encouragement is really, I think, a scam. He's saying whoever comes first, he'll be like in the carbon Pesach. He knows that he was already including everybody in the carbon Pesach. So let's think, if his sons are Talmidei Chachamim, they're also going to know automatically that they're included in the carbon Pesach. So it won't even encourage them. Only if they're Amaratzim are they going to come, because they think that it's actually going to have an impact. So maybe that explains why the daughters came running. The daughters didn't learn the Gemara b'Daf Yomi. So the daughters thought that for real, they better get there fast. But the sons, they knew that it doesn't make a difference regardless. Their father had them in mind for the carbon. So they were chilling out. Okay, so the Halakha Gemara. Amar Abaye. I don't understand what's going on over here. The shayla that Yosy asked was when the husband was not in control of who the get's going to go for. He was leaving it in the hands of whichever woman comes out first. So how could you bring a raya, Rabbi Yehuda, from our Mishnah, yet you're being pashed the shayla with toila b'das atzmai, because in our Mishnah it's speaking where he's going to choose at a later date who the get's going to be for. That's the kasha. The Gemara adds in, Tosha says just for good measure, but it's not part of the kasha. And then we brought another raya from the Gemara of Psachim with the Toila b'das acherim, which anyway the Gemara says is not relevant. Amar Rava my kasha. Rava says, I don't understand what your kasha is, because you could compare the two. Dilma, maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds. The man that is lebrera. If you hold a brera, he holds it wouldn't make a difference, and therefore he thought that there's no reason not to have a raya. It's lebrera, regardless. He holds this a brera. The last lebrera, and the mandamar who holds that you don't say brera, less lebrera. And under those premises, Rabbi Yehuda brought a raya from our Mishnah, which is a case of toila b'das atzmai, to the case of whoever comes out of the house first, the case of toila b'das acher. Because if you holds, there's no difference. If you hold yesh ber, you'll hold across the board, and if you hold ein ber, you'll hold across the board. Zok to Gemara, it's not so simple. Amalei of Mishashel Rava, I'm going to show you that there's a difference. Rabbi Yehuda sometimes Rabbi Yehuda makes a distinction between toila b'das atzmai and toila b'das acher. But Rabbi Yehuda, the toila b'das atzmai less lebrera, I'm going to show you in a brisa that Rabbi Yehuda holds toila b'das atzmai, there's no dimbrera. Yet toila b'das acherim is lebrera. Yet he holds when you toila b'das acherim, there is brera. I'm going to demonstrate that. So I'm going to show you that you cannot bring a raya from one to the next, because Rabbi Yehuda actually holds that there's a difference between toila b'das atzmai and toila b'das acher. So let's have a look. Toila b'das atzmai less lebrera. The first thing I'm going to illustrate to you is that Rabbi Yehuda holds that when you make brera and you're in control of the decision, it doesn't work. Titania, a very famous case. Someone bought a barrel of wine from the kusim, and we know it's al tevel, and it's right before Shabbos, and he wants to be able to drink this wine on Shabbos. So really what he needs to do is separate a truma into a keli and a ma'is into a keli, but he doesn't have any kelim. And he needs to use this wine for Shabbos. So he needs somehow a solution to be masakin the wine. So what he does is he says, Omer, he says, Shnei Lugin, Shani Ozet Lahafrish, Harei Truma. On Sunday, I'm going to physically remove 2 lugin from this barrel. The 2 lugin that I remove on Sunday, although I don't know right now which ones they are, but those are the ones that I'm making truma right now. But anything that I drink from this barrel over Shabbos, that's not from the wine that I'm dedicating to truma. And Asara, Meiser Rishon, there's 100 lug in the barrel, so I'm going to take 10 out, which is Meiser Rishon. Again, 10 of the lugin in here that I'm going to pick tomorrow, they're Meiser, but the rest now is Chud. And Tisha Meiser Sheni, and 9 is Meiser Sheni. So let's analyze this for a second. If you have, for instance, 100 lugin, so we know that the first thing you have to take off is truma. Truma is 2%. Now you got to take off meiser. The question is, do you take off meiser from the net remaining, which is 98 lug, or do you take off meiser from the gross before you started to be mafresh the truma? Do you take off 10? So our braysos seem to say you take 10. But the problem is, go a second later, now that you've taken 10 off, there's only 90 lug, and therefore Meiser Sheni, which you take off afterwards, you're taking from the net. It's only 9. So there's actually a shaila what halach is. There are those who learn that the Meiser you take off the net, which means you're not really taking off 10 lugin of Meiser, you're only taking 9.8, but Eser is lav davke, Asara Meiser is lav davke, but there are those who learn that Asara Meiser Rishon is davka, because when you take the Meiser Rishon, you take it off the gross amount, and therefore you have to give a full 10 for Meiser Rishon. Tisha Meiser Sheni, so for sure, Meiser Sheni, you take 10% of what's remaining. And then, turning over on to Amud Beis, Umeichel V'shoisen. Rashi learns that you have to fix this situation up as good as you can. You can't do anything with the Meiser, you have nowhere to put it. The Meiser Rishon. You can't do anything with the Truma, you have nowhere to put it. But the Meiser Sheni, you can be paida. So you should be paida the Meiser Sheni content of the barrel onto money that you have, and then V'shoisen miyad, and then you could drink it. Divrei Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosy, Rabbi Shimon, Eisher. They say you can't do it. So here clearly Rabbi Yehuda is saying that here's Tolam Das Atzmai, because you're going to pick the Truma later, you're going to pick the Meiser later, yet it doesn't work according to Rabbi Yehuda. It must be Rabbi Yehuda holds why Tolam Das Atzmai ain't Breira. And Tolam Das Acherim is like Breira. I'll also illustrate for you that Rabbi Yehuda holds in the case of Tolam Das Acherim, there is Breira. That's none be learned. Mahi ba'isen hayam. Rashi tells us that this is a response to the Mishnah that says, if there's a man who's sick and he gives his wife a get and he tells her, this get should be yours if I end up dying from this disease. So the halacha is it's a good get. We don't say that it gets chal only after he dies and then it wouldn't work because it ain't get lachamisa. Rather, we say the get works from before. So the question is, during the time that he's sick, before he dies, even if he died, what is his status? And what is her status in those days, in the interim days that he's sick? She's an eshes ish, meaning until the minute before his death, she's considered an eshes ish, which means two things. L'chorma, if she's mezana, she gets chenek, and l'kula, and again, l'chorma, she's not allowed to drink truma. She is allowed to drink truma. She's allowed to eat truma if she's married to a kohen, which means we consider her mamish fully married until a moment before the death. And Rashi explains there that even though he said me'achshav, it means that the get will be chal 1 minute before he dies. But at the end of the day, uluchimai is havagita. But when he does die, in fact, it's a good get. So this is mamish a case of breira. Because if I die, it shall be a get. It's not in his control if he could die. Avadi, that's in the hands of the Rabban Yisrael. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda makes a distinction between Doilub Das Atzmoi, where he says breira doesn't work, and Doilub Das Acherim, where he says breira does work. Zok Gemara, Amalei Rab Mishai Shel Rava, Harab Shimon, the Toila B'das Atzmai. Rab Shimon is Toila B'das Atzmai. He holds less Lebrera. In the case of Toila B'das Atzmai, he holds less Lebrera because Rab Shimon was a partner to Rab Yehuda in the halacha of Lekech Yaim Ben Akusim. The Toila B'das Acherem is Lebrera. And by Toila B'das Acherem, just like Rab Yehuda, he also holds Lebrera. Toila B'das Atzmai less Lebrera Hada Amaran. We just illustrated from the case of the Lekech Yaim Ben Akusim. Toila B'das Acherem is Lebrera. Where do you see that by Toila B'das Acherem, Rab Shimon holds Lebrera? The time we learned. Hareni Boyalech, a man wanted to be Kaddish a woman with Bia. And he said, I'm going to be boil you, Hashem Kedushin, Al Manashi Yirtza Abba. That's only if afterwards we introduce you to my father and my father likes you. So that's a mamish case of Brera. He's not in control as to whether or not his father is going to like this woman. Av Apishlo Rotza Av Mikudeshes. The first shita holds that even if the father didn't want this Mikudeshes, you don't know the Brera, he for sure is not relying on the father because in Adam he doesn't want that if his father will say it's not a good, he doesn't want her. It turns out his bia was not L'Shem Kedushin, it was L'Shem Znus, so therefore it's Mekudeshes no matter what. But Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Reb Shimon, Rotza Av Mekudeshes, Loi Rotza Av Ein Mekudeshes. So you see clearly that the Brera works even though it's Toila B'das Acher. So as an aside, it's interesting that he said, Hareini B'yalach Amanashir to Abba. Why didn't he say, I'm being boiled Amanashir to Ima? The teretz is Pasha. For sure the mother's not going to like the daughter-in-law. The question is, we already learned in the Mishnahs earlier, the mother doesn't like the daughter-in-law. Maybe my father would like the daughter-in-law. Which reminds me of a story. One Friday evening by Gawal Shabbos, the Rav noticed that there's a new guy in the shul. He looked like he was maybe in his 30s. And after davening, when the Kehillah came around to say good Shabbos to the Rav, he wished his fellow, Shalom Aleichem, who are you? He introduced himself, my name is Chaim Yankov. You look so down. Why are you so down? You look so depressed. So Chaim Yankov says, listen here. I'm a very successful lawyer. I'm a good-looking guy. I'm normal. I have a personality. I have a nice family. And for the life of me, I cannot find a collar. So he asked, the rabbi asked, tell me, it's a good question. It's very unusual. You seem to have everything going for you. You're highly desirable. How is it that you're not married, that you couldn't find a collar? He says, well, really, I have plenty of women who want to go out with me and who want to marry me. But the problem is when I take them home to introduce them to my mother nixes them all. And I don't feel like I'll ever be able to find a woman that my mother will agree to. So I'm depressed. So the Rav said, let me give you a good idea. I want you to find yourself a woman who's exactly like your mother. She should have the same habits, the same interests, maybe even wear the same perfume, have the same style of clothing. And if you bring a woman that's so much like your mother, I think your mother's going to like her and it'll be perfect. So the guy was mechuzak and he said, thank you, Rabbi, and I'm going to try it. 4 weeks later, this fellow shows up in shul again, looking more depressed than ever. And when he came around, the rabbi asked him, you look terrible, what's going on? Didn't you try my solution? He says, Rabbi, I tried your solution, and it was a great solution. I introduced this girl to my mother. She's exactly like her. She even has the same type of glasses and the same type of perfume as my mother. She had the same clothing. It's uncanny how she was exactly a younger replica of my mother. So the rabbi asked, so what went wrong? He said, my mother loved him. My father couldn't stand her. Okay, so Zok to Gemara weiter. I'm going to go a little bit further because I'm not going to be here next Shabbos, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to share next month of Shabbos. So I'm trying to get ahead so that I'll be able to have covered this daf before Shabbos. So let me turn over to the Amar Aleph, to Chavav Amar Aleph. Zok to Gemara. Loi Rotav and Mukadeshes. So you see that they both make a distinction between Toila B'das Atzmoi and Toila B'das Acher. Amar he told them, Bein Lu Rabbi Yehuda, Bein Rabbi Shimon, Sai according to Rabbi Yehuda, and Sai according to Rabbi Shimon, Loi Shna Toila B'das Atzmoi, Loi Shna Toila B'das Acher. Don't make that distinction. In fact, they both agree that there's no difference between Toila B'das Atzmoi and Toila B'das Acher. And in either case, is lahu brera. They do hold the brera. and therefore they hold Brera across the board. So if that's the case, why is it that by the case of wine, they said it doesn't work? If you hold a Brera, it should work. So if you know why it doesn't work. But the case of the barrels of wine is Amr Loiler of Meir. They told Reb Meir, how could you allow this to work? Aren't you worried that but before Shabbos ends and he has a chance to set aside the Truma and the Meiser, the barrel will pop. And then he will never be able to be mapish the Truma and Meiser, which means come to Chayis, all Shabbos, the wine that they were drinking was Tevel Rechman L'Tzlam. Amar Lahem, Reb Meir said, I'm not concerned. When that happens, I'll worry about it. I'm not going to be chayshid. That's not shchiach. But I'll call upon him. Rabbi Yehuda holds across the board yesh breira, and the reason why the wine barrel thing didn't work is for a completely different reason. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Vayter. HaKosev, Toifsei Gittin. Somebody writes the Toifsim of Gittin. And Rashi tells us someone who needs a get and he wants it fast. Someone who wants a star, he needs it fast. So the Soifrim would write up, like we have nowadays. You can buy a pre-printed ksuba that just has the blanks to fill in the details. But the generic wording, the Sofer prepared in advance. So the halacha is he could do it, but the vital information has to be left blank to be filled in at the right time. For a get, it has to be the woman's name, the man's name, and the time, and the date. Shtare milva. What if it was a star milva that they wanted to write up a template? That needs more information. It has to be you have to have place for the malva, place for the malva's name. Mokam aloiva, place for the loiva's name. Mokam amoyos, also the amount of money, and mokam azman and the date. Shtare mekach, if it's a template for a sale contract, that needs even more information. It has to have it has to leave a blank for the name of the lekeach, and the name of the seller. Mokam amoy is the sale price. Mokam asada, the coordinates of the field. Mokam azman and the date. Mipnei atakana, because of atakana. This mipnei atakana is there's like 4 pshatim in the Gemara what this means. So I'm not going to explain it now. We're going to explain it later. I'll just give you a little sneak preview. Is the mipnei atakana the reason why we allow them to prepare Gittin in advance, or the mipnei atakana that you need all these information in it? So that the Gemara will discuss. We'll get to it a different day. Zog the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Paisel b'chula. Rabbi Yehuda holds that all of these are going to be possible. You cannot write up templates, not of Gittin, not of Shtaris. The whole thing has to be written at the right time. Rabbi Lezer Machshir b'chula. Rabbi Lezer holds they're all kosher, chutz mi Gittin Nashim. Except for Gittin Nashim, shenever v'chasav lo l'shma, it has to be written in l'shma. The question is, what do you mean v'chasav lo l'shma? That's the Torah, that's the names. But the regular typhus never, not the main crux of the get. It does not have to be written l'shma. So the Gemara is going to tell us that this means, since the Torah has to be l'shma, we're going to be geyser not to write the typhus shaloi l'shma to the Torah. So therefore, we're going to treat the typhus with the same severity as we treat the Torah. So we have 3 shittas at the end of the day in the Mishnah. The first sheet of the Mishnah is that you could prepare templates for all type of shtaris, monistic shtaris, as well as Gittin. We have a Yehuda who says you cannot prepare templates for anything, and we have a Belazar who holds you can prepare templates for everything except for Gittin. Amar Yehuda Mishmuel. Yehuda Mishmuel said, although the Mishnah didn't itemize this, there's one more blank that has to be left on the get that has to be filled out l'shma when the get's actually being written l'shem de ish and the isha, and that is tzorch af makom harayat muteres l'chol adam. In the get, it has to say the words harayat muteres l'chol adam, or a variation of that. That has to be written l'shma. Zokt Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, like he said in the previous 2 Mishnayos, Rabbi Lazar. This is going according to Rabbi Lazar, the Amar Edim Esir Karsi. It's going according to Rabbi Lazar, you need Edim Esir Karsi. And therefore, the ksiva of the get is integral, that it should be written Lishma, and that's why he's saying that you have to write all these parts again. Why is it that Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel, in the last three Mishnayos, where there was an option to understand the Mishnah according to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel told us this Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Eliezer, that Mishnah and that Mishnah. Why did Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel have to specify by all three Mishnayos it's going according to Rabbi Eliezer? Why wouldn't we know one from the next? If one's Rabbi Eliezer, they're all Rabbi Eliezer. Zogt Gemara, I'll tell you why Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel have to comment on each Mishnah. Zogt Gemara Utricha. The Yashmin HaKamaisa, if Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel only told us that the first Mishnah, which says that you need to write, you're not allowed to write a get on mechuber, ain't kasvin b'mechuber, kasvin b'mechuber yotzim, it will still be a good get. So if it only had that case, I would have said behi hu the ikalo mukha Rabbi there, Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel explained the Mishnah like Rabbi Eliezer, because when you analyze the Mishnah, it seems to come out that way. Because first it said the Katani ain't kasvin, and then it said the Katani kasvin. Like Rabbi Beryl said earlier, it must be that ein kasvin is lichat chila and kasvin is b'di'evet, which means ein kasvin the toifis. You should not write the toifis b'mechuber, because where geyser you might write the toif b'mechuber. But if you wrote the toifis b'mechuber b'di'evet, it'll be a good get. So that lends itself quite nicely to go according to Rabbi Eliezer. Avol Seifa, but the next Mishnah, which discusses the Katani she'ein kima get ela b'chaismav, that the kima get is only b'chaismav, and we learned. Now, what does it mean? It's going on the case where a woman could prepare and write the get, and then hand it off to the husband to get it signed and to give it back to her. So there, Ema Reb Meir, maybe he's going according to Reb Meir. It does use the words she'ein kima get ela b'chaismav, which seems very much to say that it's going to look Reb Meir, not Reb Eliezer. So therefore, he spoke out in that case as well that it's going to according to Reb Eliezer. And how did he explain it? We learned this a couple of days ago. She'ein kima get el b'chaismav means with the Eid Mesira. Why are we calling the Eid Mesira chaismav? The answer is because you know who normally are the Eid Mesira? The same Eidim that signed the star. So when we say she'ein kima get el b'chaismav, we actually mean the Eid Mesira. That's how the Gemara explained in the last sugya. And now our sugya. Yashmin b'ahi nami ikaluk b'Reb Eliezer. There also, it's easier to say that those two earlier Mishnayos are going according to Reb Eliezer. Aval ha, but our Mishnah does not make sense to say it's going according to Reb Eliezer. You know why? Because we just say for Reb Eliezer, since the last Tana that the Mishnah introduces Reb Eliezer all the way to end, wouldn't that indicate to have a Reish Alav Reb Eliezer? So Tricha, look at our Mishnah. You had the first Shita, which we want to say to Reb Eliezer, it doesn't say Reb Eliezer. Reb Eliezer only introduced at the end of the Mishnah, where he says Machshav B'Kulam. So how could you say that the Reish of the Mishnah is Reb Eliezer if the Sefer is Reb Eliezer? So that's why Yehuda and Shmuel can tell us that they're both Reb Eliezer, but there's a machlokes what Reb Eliezer holds. The Tanakama holds that Reb Eliezer holds everything you could write templates for, even Gittin. And the second Shita held in Reb Eliezer that even though Eidim Asir Karsi, Gittin Nashim wouldn't be allowed. Why? Because it's a Gzeira writing the Taifas Shaloi Lishma, Otu, that you might write the Taif as well, Shaloi Lishma, and according to Reb Eliezer, that will literally be a puzzle again. Okay, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem, we got almost an hour ahead. I want to wish everybody a good tavach, a geshmak tavach, a listig tavach. We should have a lot of bracha and tzlacha this week.
Amen.